Okay guys, so in this video I'm going to pick up from the post which I put up about one of the techniques of Kriya Yoga, which is Pranayama. And I'm going to explain to you what Pranayama is and what it's all about and the whole kind of purpose of why a Kriya Yogi or someone who practices Kriya Yoga is taught the art of Pranayama. So basically, Pranayama is life force control. By life force control, we mean controlling the pranic shakti, the pran. And a lot of people nowadays confuse life force control or pranayama with breath control. However, pranayama is not breath control, although breath is something that you need to control to be able to control life force or to control pran. There is a link between breath and life force, and that's the kind of subtle difference. And when you understand that, you understand it's not about controlling your breath, it's actually about controlling pran. Now, why do you want to control pran or practice pranayama? Well, in order to be able to completely switch off your consciousness from the external world, you have to do more than just be able to switch off the five sensory organs. So switching off the electrical signals, for example, you could close your eyes, you could sit in a really quiet place where there's no noise, and you could be fully concentrated on one particular thought, and you can more or less start switching off the various five electrical signals. However, how do you switch off your involuntary neurons? So the functions which you have no control over, like breathing, like your heart rate, for example. How do you take control over the involuntary function of your body? Because other than switching off the sensory neurons and their electrical impulses, you also have to be able to switch off the motor neurons and their electrical impulses. And that is the art of pranayama. So basically, the function, there's a number of functions. So there is the breath is involved in this, the heart is involved in this, and of course there's life force, so pran is involved in this. But what is pran? Basically, pran is the force, the shakti, you could call it the mahaprakriti, that ultimately gives your body life. Now, you can argue that and say, well, don't you need to be able to drink and eat food to have life? Yes, that's required for life, because when you eat food and when you breathe, for example, and you drink water, ultimately what you're doing is breaking down atoms within your body, which then give out energy for you to continue doing your psychological, physiological processes. However, they do not give you life. For example, when someone passes away, if that was the case, that you could bring life is dependent on food, water, and sunshine, for example, you could put a dead body under the sun, you could pump the stomach with food and water, or put a glucose strip or whatever onto the dead body, bring it back to life. But you can't, and you can't because the pranic shakti is no longer there. And so that's the kind of reason where the idea of pran comes from. So if you're able to control pran, the pranic shakti, then you are able to switch off your motor and your motor neurons as well as your sensory neurons, and then you enter the deathless state. But how do you go about doing that? Well, there's a technique in Kriya Yoga, and then the Ramayana Vayu talks about this technique through Hanuman. Hanuman is Pavanputra Hanuman, meaning that he is the son of the air god, and that's where this whole idea comes from. Pranayama is Hanuman. Hanuman is the general of Ram's army. It is the general of your soul when you are sitting in meditation and practicing pranayama, and he is the force, the power, the technique whom ultimately helps the soul to lift the Kundalini Shakti from the Muladhara Chakra or Lanka up through the various other centers along the spine, which have higher states of consciousness. Now, There's a whole kind of science involved around the spine, and I've mentioned that in a couple of my last posts, that the Ramayana actually is something that happens in the spine and the brain. And I'll talk about that in another video, because it just starts getting complicated if I try and mix the two. But basically, Pranayama, like I said, it's about controlling life force control. But how do you do that? How do you take control over the involuntary function? There are techniques in Kriya Yoga. One of them is the Hong Saw technique of concentration, where you watch the breath, etc. But the science behind it is basically that ultimately you enter into this deathless state, and you do that by controlling the dynamo of the heart. Why the heart? Because the reason why you need breath is because your heart functions to purify your blood. It sends the good blood, for example, to go and do its necessary job throughout your body, but then it also has to purify the dark venous blood. Now, this is where your diet has a lot to do with being able to go into the deathless state, and one of the reasons why the yogis of ancient India, or the rishis, and even people nowadays who are very advanced in the art of pranayama, have a very, very light diet, and they're very careful with what they eat. Now, that doesn't always necessarily mean that they don't eat chicken or fish. I think some of them probably do, but very, very, very occasionally, where perhaps they don't have much of a choice. However, things like beef, pork, etc. are absolutely not recommended, and alcohol is an absolute no-no. You may know or not know that once you consume alcohol, it takes about 40 days for it to ultimately leave your bloodstream. There's always small amounts of it. So the diet is really important when controlling, when trying to take control over involuntary functions, because if you can, through your diet, reduce the amount of venous or dark blood within your body, then ultimately you make life a little bit easier when you're practicing pranayama. Life force control. So basically, the heart has a left and a right side, and within the heart there are things called the sinoatrial nodes, and basically they send out electrical signals which pump the heart in sync to be able to pump blood throughout the body. Now, if your body is doesn't have a high content of dark venous blood, then there is no need for really the body to, or the heart, to function, because that's the purpose of the heart, is to purify the dark venous blood. No dark venous blood, no need for the heart to pump. And when you practice these techniques in Kriya Yoga that Vayu talks about in the Ramayana and tries to explain it in a very poetic fashion, you ultimately begin to realize that it is very, very much possible. People have done it. There are yogis out in the Himalayas right now who are able to go into the deathless state. It's also mentioned in the Bible, where one of the passages, it says that I protest by rejoicing in Christ. By Christ, it means the Krishna consciousness, or the Christ consciousness, or the Kutasakatayani, the universal consciousness. So I protest by rejoicing in Christ, I die daily. These people knew the art of being able to die, and the art of being able to die consciously, switching off the dynamo of the heart and taking control over your involuntary functions, ultimately leads to the body not decaying. So, for example, one of the things that really advanced yogis can do is that when they go into Mahasamadhi, what happens is that for about 21 days, their bodies do not decay because of their practice of pranayama. And Paramahansa Yoganand, who brought over the science of Kriya Yoga to the West in America, when he took his Mahasamadhi, his body did not decay for 21 days, and that was officially reported by the coroner, and it's kind of fact. I mean, there are some people that kind of argue it, but ultimately he practiced what he was preaching. So that's pranayama in a nutshell. And if you have any questions around it, do let me know, and I'll speak to you later. Bye.